Welcome back, family, to the South Florida Recruiting Report. Marcus Benjamin here, South Florida recruiting reporter, giving you all kinds of news from the area, the football hotbed when it comes to high school football and recruiting. And it's a big couple of days for the Miami Hurricanes. Down here, March 5th is known as 305 days, and the Miami Hurricanes have a long list of recruits that they're expecting to visit Coral Gables on Thursday. And the insider that I'm bringing on to talk about it all is my guy, EJ Holland. New to South Florida, but it doesn't seem like it at all. He's definitely fitting in down here as he is the Miami recruiting insider for On Three. Kind enough to join me today on the South Florida Recruiting Report. Thanks for joining me today, EJ.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, Marcus. You can have me on the show anytime, man. Marcus is my guy. Always appreciate you, man.
Absolutely, man. First off, before we kind of get into this recruiting stuff, how you like in Miami? What's kind of like the biggest surprise to you, and what's the best food you've had so far, bro?
Well, I've been down to South Florida during my 1 month on Miami, but I haven't officially moved yet, man. So
Oh wow.
I'm still doing it remotely, which has been kind of crazy, but I can't wait to get down to South Florida. And, the big thing I want to try is a Cuban sandwich, obviously. So you're going to have to give me the rack on that, man. So when I officially move down there, I'm ready to have all the food and everything. I haven't had good Mexican food in a long time, so I'm hoping the 305 will produce some good Mexican food, but we'll see, man. But yeah, no, I mean the transition to the beat's been great. Miami's been a lot more exciting to cover than Michigan. Uh,
Okay.
from a recruiting perspective, I think Michigan had all those scandals going, so
For
I guess it
sure.
was exciting in that way. But I think
Mhm.
Miami is, recruiting at a higher clip. They're in it with so many elite prospects, and it's been super fun to get out and see these guys. I've been to the Rivals camp, I've been to the Seven Showcase in Atlanta, I've been to the Tom Lemming Showcase also in Atlanta, I've made the rounds in North Carolina and Virginia. So I've been hitting the road hard, and a lot of these recruits are just so excited to talk about Miami. And you see that reflected in some of these visitors list at 305 day, but also for the rest of spring, for summer official visits. The buzz around the program, I think, is at an all-time high coming off of the Natty appearance and what Coach Cristobal is really building in Coral Gables. And, you asked me what the biggest surprise has been. To me, it's been not the elite prospects. I knew that Miami was going to recruit at a high clip. That's why I joined the Miami beat, right? But
Right.
the biggest surprise to me is I think that a lot of people from the outside looking in, and I've mentioned this before, a lot of people from the outside looking in, they look at Miami and they look at the U and they look at the flashiness and, the NIL and everything that comes with Miami, big city, bright lights. But it's not just smoke and mirrors, man. Like Miami's actually building a disciplined culture under Mario Cristobal, and a lot of recruits mentioned that the culture, the culture, the culture. And maybe that's not necessarily what's at the forefront of outsiders' minds when it comes to Miami. But if you ask any top recruit, they'll tell you the culture and the development are two big things that really stand out about Miami. So yeah, Miami's fun. It's exciting. It's Miami, man. But I think uh, when you peel back the layers, there's a lot more there for Miami to have not just short-term success, but sustained success to where they can compete for national championships, year in and year out.
Absolutely. And it's evident, obviously, with the playoff run that they had. And then also, we're expecting a number of Miami Hurricanes to be drafted in the upcoming 2026 NFL draft. So the development is there, the culture is there as well. You said you were at the sevens, 7-on-7 in Georgia. And one of the top recruits that were there playing for Cam Newton's team, C1N, was Nick Lanier. The highly coveted wide receiver who could also play some defense as well, uh, is highly pegged to commit to Miami at some point. It seems like that. I said that, on another podcast a while back that hey, if signing day were tomorrow, I would say Nick Lanier is committing to Miami and throwing up the U. You spoke to him recently, EJ. What are your thoughts on Nick Lanier committing to the U over the Contenders?
Yeah, definitely think that Miami is in the pole position right now. I think he's a heavy Miami lean. Obviously, I've only been on the beat a month, so I wasn't in on the early predictions for Nick Lanier, but I did put in a prediction coming out of that event for him to end up at Miami. I think the big thing for him is he continues to publicly name Miami as leader. He's a kid who doesn't necessarily enjoy the process. You can kind of tell he's more of a quiet kid, a little bit more reserved. He's not a prospect who necessarily wants to just be in the limelight with social media and the media in general. So I think he could make an early decision and just kind of get this stuff over with. It doesn't seem like I said he's part of the recruiting hype train. He's a kid who's about his business, which is good. I think with him, he told me he's looking at making a decision this spring. Now he has official visits locked in. He has one to Miami, one to LSU, one to USC. And I said, hey, man, well, you scheduled those already. So, are you going to take it into summer? And he said, no, I could make it before the summer official visit. So, can Miami close as soon as this week when he's on campus for 305 day? Potentially, can they close a little bit later in the spring? I think it's a probability at that point. So I think Miami's the clear team to beat. I think he does want to stay home. And you mentioned Miami, having guys drafted and how that's a big selling point. Another big selling point to local players, especially wide receivers, is obviously Malachi Tony and what he did as a true freshman. And I think Nick Lanier sees the opportunity to come in and potentially do something similar for Miami, and having Malachi Tony there as kind of a bit of a mentor, as a fellow South Florida guy who went there and did that. I think that's certainly appealing to him as well. So I really love where Miami stands with Nick Lanier.
I would also say that Nick Lanier is the Malachi Tony of this class. As far as talent is concerned, I think he's by far and away the most talented, explosive player in South Florida for the 2026 class. And I think Miami is, or 2027 class rather. I think Miami is really in prime position. I think you can actually say he's a must get. He's a must get for the class. If they don't land Nick Lanier, it would be very, very, I think, disappointing. If just like if Miami didn't land Malachi Tony. He is one of the many visitors, like you mentioned, that are going to be on campus for 305 day. But there are a ton of other guys that are also expected to kind of, make their way to the University of Miami. In your mind, who is the biggest visitor that Miami has to make the biggest impact with on 305 day?
Yeah, I'm going with Caden Henderson, one of the top linebackers in the country. He's making his way down from Tampa, which, isn't too far, but I think it shows, especially on a Thursday, making your way down from Tampa to South Florida. It shows how interested he is in Miami, how much he wants to get around the program, because he's also coming back for a spring practice. Miami, I believe, is the only school that is scheduled to get him in twice this spring. He also has an official visit locked in. Now, I think he's the most important visitor because, Miami has been playing catch up here. When I saw him at the Under Armour All-America game, and I was doing incognito work covering Miami, which Marcus, because you were there with me, I was still technically covering Michigan, but I sat down with Caden and, he was honest with me. He said, hey, going into the season, Miami was kind of on the outside looking in. Now, I think Miami has firmly cemented itself as a top 3 team. Now, Texas A&M has a lot of buzz. They received a prediction from our national analyst, Steve Wiltfong, and I'd agree that Texas A&M is probably the team to beat right now. But I think Miami and its recent surge certainly gives me reason for optimism. I would say the longer Caden Henderson takes this process, the better for Miami. They have done a great job of, again, increasing their stock, but also building that relationship with him, with Mario Cristobal going through the school, Corey Heatherman in consistent contact and also stopping by the school during the winter contact period, and just him being able to see what Heatherman's defense looked like this season. I think that really moved the needle as Miami made its run to the national title game. So I wouldn't be, yeah, it kind of sucks when you see a prediction come in for a top target elsewhere, but I wouldn't be completely discouraged there. I think this event has an opportunity to give Miami even more momentum here. And I think, again, if Caden makes his other visits to Miami throughout the offseason, including his OV in the summer, Miami could certainly overtake Texas A&M. So I would say Caden Henderson for that reason, just, the amount of work they put in to climb back into this recruitment and the small hump they still have to get over to beat Texas A&M. That's kind of why I went with him as the most important visitor of the weekend.
Yeah, definitely like Caden Henderson a lot. Every time I spoke to him personally, his eyes kind of lit up when I mentioned Miami. So I think Miami has kind of always kind of subtly kind of been in this race, and it's very indicative of the staff and just kind of how they recruit or how they've been recruiting over the past couple cycles. Although Corey Heatherman has only been there, just for a full year at this point, but they're always kind of under the radar for a lot of recruits. Although you may see a prediction for another school. So I would imagine Miami's going to be in this race until the very end, even if he does commit to another school like A&M or another school. Now, like I said, there's a lot of recruits that are going to be on that campus, that beautiful campus down in Coral Gables tomorrow. But of all these players, which do you think Miami has the best chance to actually land?
Yeah, obviously we mentioned Nick Lanier at the top. I think two guys to really keep a close eye on that are currently in 2028, and I say currently because so many, I shouldn't say so many, but a number of South Florida kids are considering making the reclass, making the jump to 2027. And two of those guys will be on campus, Masai Dobson, top 300 edge, as well as Amir Sears, the number one athlete in the country. Both of those guys, again, are 2028s, but could move to 2027. Both are very high on Miami. Miami is considered the Rivals recruiting prediction machine leader for both of them. Could Miami get an early commitment? And I say early because they're technically 2028 right now. I think it's possible. When you have events like these and you get so many guys on campus, some guys might get caught up in the moment. Other guys might just say, hey, Miami's the school. I feel it. And so I think events like these are likely to produce a commitment. And so I'm definitely keeping a close eye on Nick for the reasons I stated at the top, as well as some of these guys that are, potential reclass candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. Amir Sears, aside from Nick Lanier, probably the top athlete. So I could totally understand him looking to reclass, trying to get to that bag a little bit earlier. You hear me? It's kind of the name of the game now. Really, just kind of, get to the next level as soon as possible. And you mentioned Meshi Dobson as well. Every time I speak to him, it's definitely Miami's kind of at the top of his list compared to the competitors. I think a lot of these kids in South Florida, me being a guy who has covered South Florida high school football for over 10 years, most of these guys do want to stay home. They were just waiting for Miami to have a season like they had last season, to be honest with you, where everything that Cristobal and the staff is selling is actually coming to fruition. So they can actually see it and they can believe it more. When you beat teams like Ohio State and Ole Miss and A&M on the road, that is going to send shockwaves throughout the country and throughout the minds of these recruits. So I think Miami's going to continue with this momentum for sure. And they could possibly land the top quarterback in the state, in my mind, I think that's Gavin Davidson. A lot of momentum has been building with the Cardinal Mooney state champion quarterback. Uh, a lot of schools are involved, want to add Davidson to their 2027 class. What's your thoughts on Davidson, Miami landing him as their quarterback?
Yeah, I think Davidson, he's one of the hottest prospects in the country at the quarterback position. He just started to really, land a lot of these offers during the winter contact period, including the one from Miami. Miami offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson went out and saw him throw live, made that trip to Sarasota and offered him on the spot. Miami's now in his top 8. He's set to come in this week. So I think Miami has quickly built up momentum there. But I think a lot of his recruitment is still new. I think he still wants to get to some of these other places as well. But I would say Miami is certainly in a strong spot for Davin Davidson. The wrinkle here with 2027 quarterback recruiting for Miami is, will Neiman Lawrence reclassify? I mentioned Sears and Dobson. Neiman Lawrence is another reclass candidate, and Miami's in a really strong position for him. He'll also be on campus for 305 day. Does he reclass to 2027? That could change Miami's outlook at the quarterback position. So, I think Miami's in a great spot for Davin, but, I think all eyes are on Lawrence's reclass decision.
That is quite interesting. That's kind of like the new thing as far as recruiting is concerned. I wouldn't say a new thing, but it's a more popular thing is to reclass. Right now, watching highlights of Davin Davidson of his state championship year, I was always impressed with him and just kind of the way he could just sling the ball off off of his kind of back foot at times, but he can just drive it as well. Really strong arm and just really great size. Has underrated mobility as well to kind of get out of the pocket. So if Miami can land a Davin Davidson, it might be a situation where he actually stays at the school because that's kind of the thing with quarterbacks these days, right? EJ, it's like quarterbacks will commit to a school, but then transfer to another, i.e. Cam Ward, Carson Beck. Now the list kind of goes on with quarterbacks, highly touted quarterbacks that commit to a school, sign with a school, but end up actually playing somewhere else. I think if Davin Davidson does commit to Miami, I think it's a very high chance that he does stay with the Hurricanes. So definitely a high prospect on the list that will be on campus in the next couple of days. So that's really exciting, I think, for Hurricanes fans just to get him on campus. And like you said, a lot of other schools in the mix here. So the Canes will have to battle a lot of different schools if they want to indeed sign Davidson in the end. Lastly, EJ, I just kind of want to talk about some guys that are committed to the Hurricanes for the 2027 class that may be, looking at other options as well. One of which is Amari Stevens. This is a guy who, committed to Miami relatively early in his recruiting process, and is not, I would say, necessarily shy about saying, hey, yeah, other schools are in contact with him. So what I want to ask you, EJ, I know you're kind of new to the beat or whatnot, but in your opinion, do you think Amari Stevens stays in the Miami Hurricanes 2027 class?
Yeah, I had a chance to spend some time with Stevens over the weekend at the Sevens tournament. So, I feel like, yes, I think there's a really strong chance he stays in the class. I think that he kind of put it out as best he could. He said, look, Miami's where I want to be, but I also want a chance to enjoy the recruiting process. You only get to do it once. He's a kid, and he wants to make some of these official visits and maybe experience what some of his peers are experiencing. Maybe, he likes the recruiting process and just wants to get out and see other schools. I think that can cause some worry or some anger, I guess, from the fan base because you don't really want to see your commits taking other visits. And also, anything can happen on those official visits, especially in the NIL era. But I think that in his heart, Amari does want to be at Miami, and there's a reason he's been committed to Miami for more than a year. He's also set to be back for 305 day. He told me he's trying to get to as many spring practices as possible. He has his official visit set up for May 29th, which is when the other commits will be on campus as well. He has a great relationship with Cristobal and Kevin Beard. And Miami gives him a chance to stay locally. The other interesting thing that he told me is, he's recruiting others to Miami. He spent a lot of time with Nick Lanier, even when, I was talking to Nick, Amari was, interrupting my interview saying, go Canes, they're throwing up the U together, things of that nature. So that's certainly a positive as well. So I believe Amari. I believe him. I think he just wants to make other visits to enjoy the process. And like I said, maybe that's not what you want to see from your highest rated commit right now. But I think that, he's a kid and he's doing what kids do. But like I said, I think there's a really good chance he just sticks with Miami at the end. He's a South Florida guy. Like I said, I think he wants to be at Miami.
Yeah, I know Kevin Beard is doing his best to kind of keep him in the class. This is a situation I think that should be monitored kind of till the end because you kind of never know with these kids and kind of where their mind is at as far as where they indeed want to sign. Because if he has an explosive senior season, which he can definitely have, there may be more schools calling. There may be more schools trying to get him on a last second visit or game day visit. And they might change his perspective or they may offer something greater for him. So it could be a situation where he does stay loyal and stay with the Hurricanes, but I wouldn't be totally surprised if he ended up signing somewhere else as well, just because of how the game is these days. And Miami is in contention for other receivers as well. I think there's a possibility that, he does stay, but I would say it's probably about 60-40 right now for me. 60 that he stays and maybe 40 that he goes somewhere else. But as of right now, I think he sticks with the Hurricanes as well. All right, EJ. I mean, I got you on the podcast for the first time here in South on the South Florida Recruiting Report. I really appreciate the insight. Great stuff from you as always. Tell the people where they can find more stuff from you.
Yeah, no, definitely. You can head over to canesport.com. You can sign up for just $1 today. So head over there. You can get all my Miami recruiting content, which I'm trying to put out a ton every day. And also you can follow me on Twitter at EJ Holland on 3. But appreciate your time, Marcus. Would love to come back anytime and excited to get more into Miami recruiting and, the Florida high school football scene. I'm really excited to head down there and cover some Florida high school football this fall, man. So I hope to see you around.
Awesome stuff, EJ. Thanks for joining me again, and I hope to see you again soon for sure. That's going to wrap it up for the South Florida Recruiting Report. Marcus Benjamin here, bringing you news from the area regarding the Miami Hurricanes, Florida Gators, Florida State Seminoles, as well as UCF, USF, FIU, FAU. Definitely going to continue to keep this podcast going to give you some inside information when it comes to South Florida recruits. Until the next episode.